This woman fed a family of 6 on one income, with no dishwasher, no microwave, and no Google. She could put a full dinner on the table in the time it takes us to argue about which restaurant to order from. I brought her to 2026, expecting her to be blown away by how easy we've made everything. 90 seconds into a grocery store, she turned to me with a look of pure concern. And by the end of the day, she asked me one quiet question about the way we live now, and I genuinely did not have an answer. Because here's the thing, this woman was sold a promise. Do everything right. Keep the perfect home, raise the perfect children, be the perfect wife, and you will be happy. A lot of women in her time did everything right, and they were miserable. So I brought her to 2026 to show her that women finally got the freedom she never had. I was not ready for what she'd make of it. Let's see what a woman from 1955 thinks of us. Quick introduction. If this is your first time here, yes, that's a real woman from 1955. And no, I'm not going to fully explain how. Short version, I built a temporal bridge. I reach back, I pull someone forward for a day, and they go home with the memory of it. That's the whole channel. Meet Dorothy, a housewife from 1955. And before you picture a cheerful lady in an apron, let me correct something almost everyone gets wrong about her decade. We remember the 1950s as a perfect, simple, happy time. White picket fence, wholesome. For a lot of women, it was a cage with nice curtains. Dorothy couldn't open a bank account in her own name without her husband's permission. She couldn't get a credit card on her own. Most women couldn't, not really, until a law finally changed that in 1974. If she wanted a job, the newspaper ads were literally split into help wanted men and help wanted women, and the women's column mostly topped out at secretary or nurse. Her worth was measured by how clean her house was and how content her husband looked. There was even a name for the quiet despair so many of them felt. A writer named Betty Friedan called it the problem that has no name. So Dorothy isn't a cartoon in an apron. She's a smart, capable woman handed a very small box to live in. And I brought her to 2026 to see what women did when they finally climbed out of it. First, I took Dorothy to a grocery store. She just stopped. Not at the size, at the abundance. Strawberries in winter. An entire aisle of food that's already cooked. She held up a rotisserie chicken, fully roasted, somehow cheaper than a raw one, like it was witchcraft. Someone already cooked this, and it costs less? Then she asked me something I wasn't expecting. So, what do you do with all the time you save? I said, honestly, we work. Then I took her somewhere I knew would answer her better than I could, my parents' house. They already know about the bridge, long story, so they just set an extra plate and went about their evening. And Dorothy got to do the thing she does best, watch. She watched my dad load the dishwasher while my mom answered a work email. She watched them trade off. He cooks, she pays the bills, both of them tired from a full day at their own jobs. In Dorothy's world, that did not happen. She leaned over and whispered, "Does he always help like that?" And when I said yes, they both work, so they both run the house, she went quiet. Not upset, just... Nobody had ever told her that was allowed. Then she asked my mom the question that cracked the whole day open. Why do you both have to work? In my time, she said, one paycheck did all this. And that's the real story nobody told Dorothy. In 1955, one income, usually the husband's, could buy a house, a car, and raise a few kids. Today, for most families, it takes 2 incomes just to reach the same place. We didn't add a second paycheck to get ahead. We added it to keep up. Dorothy did that math in her head, and her face fell a little. So you have all these machines, and both of you work, and it buys what one of ours did. I didn't have a clean answer. But the thing this whole video is about was still coming. Then I introduced Dorothy to a friend of mine. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah runs a company, 40 employees, built it herself. Dorothy shook her hand and asked what her husband did. Sarah said, "Oh, I'm not married. Don't really want to be. The company's my baby." I have never watched a worldview reorganize in real time like that. Because in 1955, an unmarried woman in her 30s wasn't a CEO. She was a spinster, an object of pity. Something had gone wrong with her. And here was Sarah, successful, happy, free, and not one part of her life was an apology. Dorothy got quiet, then asked the question I think she was really asking herself. And nobody thinks less of you for it? They can try. This was the part I brought Dorothy for, to see that a woman could build a whole life that was entirely her own. And for a while, it was pure joy. But freedom, it turns out, came with a bill she could see and we can't. Then I took Dorothy to meet someone I'll call Ellen. Ellen is 42, and a year ago she left her husband. Not because of some scandal. He wasn't a monster. He was just cold and controlling, and she'd spent 15 years feeling like a guest in her own life. So one day, she signed a lease on a small apartment in her own name, and she left. I watched Dorothy's face the whole time Ellen told that story. And it wasn't shock. It was something closer to grief. Because Dorothy knew exactly what that would have cost her in 1955. A woman who left her husband back then often had no money of her own, no credit, no way to sign a lease, and a whole town ready to decide she was the one who failed. Leaving wasn't a choice you got to make. It was a cliff. Ellen looked at her cold marriage and simply walked out of it and built a quieter, smaller, happier life. Dorothy didn't even know that was a thing a woman was allowed to want. She asked Ellen one question, very gently. "And you're all right? On your own?" "For the first time in years, yeah, I am." This was the part I brought Dorothy for. The deepest freedom of all. The freedom to leave, to not be trapped. And watching it land on her was genuinely moving. And then Dorothy noticed the thing that changed the whole day. She looked around Ellen's apartment, tidy, peaceful, hers, and she asked softly, "But who checks on her? Who's next door?" And Ellen paused and admitted she didn't really know her neighbors. I didn't answer either, because I was starting to see what Dorothy was seeing. Here's what Dorothy understood that I didn't until she said it out loud. She spent her whole life being told she could have a home or a self, but not both. We tell women now they can have all of it. The career, the family, the independence, the perfect everything. And Dorothy saw the truth of that promise. Women didn't get freedom instead of the impossible standard. They got freedom on top of it. She thought about Ellen, finally free, finally at peace and completely on her own, with no one next door who even knew her name. And she asked me the question, the one from the start, the one I couldn't answer. Who helps her? Because here's the thing Dorothy had that we lost. Her world was a cage, but it was not a lonely one. There were neighbors who knew her name, women on every porch in the exact same boat, family down the street. When a baby was born or someone got sick, the whole block showed up. Dorothy had no freedom and a full village. Ellen has total freedom and an apartment where nobody knows her name. And neither of them got the whole deal. We didn't fix the impossible thing we ask of women. We just took away the help and called it progress. Dorothy figured that out in an afternoon. It takes most of us a lifetime if we get there at all. It was time to send Dorothy home. Back to 1955. Back to the cage with the nice curtains. But also back to the porch and the neighbors and the village we don't have anymore. She didn't leave thinking her time was better. She'd felt the walls of it her whole life. and she was genuinely glad the young women here could be anything they wanted. She just wished we'd kept the one thing her world got right, that nobody, no woman, no mother, no person, was ever meant to do it all alone. She fed 6 people a night with no machines, and she never once did it by herself. We have every machine imaginable, and somehow we've never been more on our own. I brought a 1955 housewife to 2026 to show her how far women have come, and she spent the whole day quietly worried about how alone we got on the way. Who helps her? I still don't have a good answer. Maybe that's the thing we're supposed to build next. If this one got you, hit like and subscribe, and maybe go call a friend who's doing way too much alone. Let's see who I pull out of history next.